Newark Liberty International Airport wore winter like a thin veil. Snow drifted in lazy spirals outside the concourse windows, just enough to fog the glass and soften the edges of everything beyond it. Inside, there was no softness at all, only motion. Wheels snapped over tile seams. Announcements crackled overhead. Children wailed in the universal dialect of delays, and people moved with the urgent certainty of those who believed the next gate would change their lives. Serena Hart walked through it like she owned the air. At 39, she didn't just lead a company, she led a current. As CEO of Eris, she had become a name that slid cleanly into boardrooms from New York to Zurich, a name that made investors sit up straighter and competitors check their numbers twice. Her schedule was stitched together by assistants and chauffeurs and calendar alerts that sounded like a heartbeat. Today, she was meant to board a private jet for Davos, where she'd speak about post-carbon infrastructure as if the future were a runway she could simply pave. Her assistant had already cleared security. The corridor toward private access was just ahead. One last turn, one last stretch of polished floor. Serena didn't take it, because through the glass partition, separating first-class commercial from the quieter stream that fed into private departure, she saw a man kneel to tie a child's shoelace. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was a small, ordinary act in a place built for big departures, and it stopped her cold. His coat was cheaper than she remembered, his hair thinner, but the jawline was the same, sharp, familiar. The hands were the same too, steady, capable, careful in a way that suggested he'd spent years doing things that mattered even when no one applauded. Micah Reed. He rose slowly, not yet noticing her. Beside him sat a girl with long hair the colour of pale wheat, eyes lowered into a book as if the world could be kept at bay by paper. Another girl, half in her coat, laughed and pointed at a vending machine like it was a miracle dispensing sugar and joy. Serena's chest tightened so hard she thought her ribs might crack. She knew those faces. Not because she had been there to watch them change, she hadn't, but because she carried their beginnings like a bruise you never stopped touching, because their eyes held a shape she recognized with terror and aching clarity. Nora and Elise, her daughters. The twins she had left when they were 2 days old. 6 years evaporated in a single inhale. Hospital lights, 2 tiny bracelets, a pen in her shaking hand as she signed discharge papers alone. The last morning, no shouting, no thrown objects, no slammed doors. Just Micah's face, grey with exhaustion, as if he'd been awake for a century. Just the silence between them, vast and final. An announcement cut through the air. Flight 227 to Austin, now boarding at gate C3. Serena's heels felt glued to the floor. Nora turned a page without lifting her gaze. Elise tugged Micah's sleeve, asking something Serena couldn't hear. Micah smiled, tired, real, unguarded, and answered with a softness Serena remembered from nights when the world felt safer. Then he looked up. Their eyes met through 2 panes of glass and a canyon of absence. It lasted seconds, maybe less. But inside those seconds, Serena felt something shift like a fault line breaking beneath her feet. Micah didn't wave, didn't blink, didn't soften. He simply looked at her as though she were weather. Something that happened, something you endured, then turned away with a calm that hurt worse than rage ever could. Serena's phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. Jet is ready, clearance is waiting. Serena didn't move, didn't reply. Let it leave without her. The world kept rushing past, but she stood still, a person stepping out of time while everyone else kept spending it. Eventually, she turned away from private access and walked in the opposite direction. Not toward the exit, not toward a lounge, just toward somewhere quiet enough to hear herself think. She found an empty gate and sat in a corner where no one looked too closely. Her hands were steady when she unlocked her phone. That was the cruelest part. She could negotiate billion-dollar contracts without flinching. She could stand on stages and speak about saving the planet. But her thumb hovered over a name like it was a live wire. Micah Reed. The number was still saved. It had survived new devices, new passwords, new lives. She opened a message draft and typed, "It's me." Then stared at it, disgusted by how small it looked on the screen. Too casual, too selfish, too late. She deleted it, typed again, deleted again. Finally, she locked the screen like she could lock the feeling away too. But on the flight back to Austin, alone on her jet, the engine hum a constant, the cabin dim as a confession, Serena stared out at a sky smeared grey with winter and whispered to no one, "They're not babies anymore." Her voice cracked on the last word, and it startled her. It had been years since anything had cracked her. Outside the window, the snow had stopped. Inside her, something had started to melt. Austin greeted her with a low ceiling of clouds, and the kind of cold that didn't bite so much as linger. Serena stepped out, without an entourage, without cameras, without the usual choreography. No one held a tablet with her name. She carried her own bag. She hated how symbolic it felt. In her penthouse office on the 48th floor of Heiress Tower, she shut the door and said to her assistant, "No calls until I say otherwise." Then she stared at the city below, not really seeing the buildings, but the reflection in the glass. Her face had aged well, maintained by discipline and money and the kind of control the world praised. But her eyes were tired in a way that no schedule could fix. A knock came, soft and precise. Carmen Vale stepped in, Serena's most discreet liaison, ex-federal analyst turned private intelligence advisor. Carmen didn't waste words. She set a charcoal folder on the desk and said, "He's in Salt Lake City." Serena sat. The leather chair creaked like it disapproved. She opened the folder. Micah Reed, 42, current occupation, part-time music teacher at a charter middle school. Residence, small rental near Liberty Park. Medical, diagnosed 8 months ago. ALS, early onset. Serena read that line twice, then a third time, as if repetition could change the letters. ALS, a word too short for something that vast. She turned to the page. Photos. Micah walking with Nora and Elise after school. Snow caught in their hair. Micah at a keyboard in a music room, guiding a child's posture, smiling like he was borrowing energy from the act of giving it. Micah asleep on a couch, both girls curled against him, a mug on the table that said "Best Dad Ever," another chipped mug with a faded heart. Serena blinked hard and looked away, throat burning. Carmen hesitated, then slid an envelope from the folder. There's more. Inside was a scanned page of handwritten sheet music, staff lines filled in and then broken, lyrics scribbled beneath like someone had tried to translate pain into sound. "I tried to build a song from what you left me, but the melody breaks where your name should be." The final line trailed off in ink, unfinished, as if the writer's hand had stopped mid-thought and never found the strength to return. "It was in a school drive," Carmen said quietly. "He uploads lyrics for his students. This one was never shared, saved privately." Serena set the page down like it might cut her. She stood, went to her safe, and opened it with careful fingers. Inside was a small linen box. 2 envelopes rested there untouched, each addressed in Serena's unmistakable handwriting. Nora Elise. Letters she'd written 5 years ago. Letters she'd never mailed. She placed them on the desk beside Micah's unfinished music and stared at the pile like it was evidence. Then she picked up her phone, typed, "It's me." This time she didn't delete it. She pressed send. The next day, Serena landed in Salt Lake City under a sky heavy with grey. She sat in the terminal longer than she needed to, watching families move past her. Hands linked, shoulders touching, people belonging to one another without thinking twice. A driver held a sign that read, "Miss H, no full name. No attention." Serena slid into the back of the SUV and gave an address in a flat voice. The heater hummed, the scent of citrus cleaner hanging in the air. The clinic near Liberty Park was small and brick, almost shy. Serena waited across the street behind tinted glass, hands clasped so tightly her fingers ached. Then the door opened. Micah came out first, moving slowly, winter hat pulled low. Nora and Elise flanked him like loyal shadows, one on each side, each holding one of his hands as if they were sharing the job of keeping him steady. Serena forgot to breathe. Micah paused at the sidewalk, looked both ways, then lifted his gaze, straight toward her car. Their eyes met again, this time with no glass partition to pretend distance was safety. He didn't look surprised. He looked finished with surprise, as if some part of him had always known she'd reappear only when time sharpened the stakes. Serena's hand was on the door handle before her brain caught up. She stepped out into cold air that felt like punishment. "Micah," she said. Her voice came out thin. Nora and Elise turned. Elise blinked, confused. Nora's gaze sharpened like a child piecing together a truth she didn't want. Micah lifted a hand. Not a greeting. A stop. "You don't get to do this," he said calmly. His voice was firm, steady, stripped of drama. "Not like this." "I'm not here to cause a scene," Serena managed. I wanted to see them." Micah's mouth tightened. "They didn't want to see you disappear either. But that happened." The words landed slowly, numbing first, then burning. Snow along the curb had been trampled into grey slush. Nothing pure, nothing soft. "They don't need you to watch, Serena," Micah said. "They needed you to stay." Serena looked down because she couldn't hold his eyes and stand upright at the same time. Nora tugged his sleeve. "Dad, can we go?" "Yeah," Micah said, immediately gentler with her than with Serena. "Let's go." The three of them walked towards the clinic entrance. Serena stayed where she was, frozen, too proud to chase and too wrecked to move. Just before the sliding doors closed, Nora turned back. Not with tears, not with yelling, with one look, sharp, aware, and wet at the corners, a child who remembered everything. Then the glass swallowed her. Serena got back into the SUV without speaking. The door shut with a final heavy sound. As the car pulled away and the city blurred into snow and red lights, Serena leaned her forehead against the window and cried without sound. No sobs, no drama. Just one long exhale like her body had been holding in regret for 6 years, and finally ran out of room. Serena didn't sleep the first night in Salt Lake. Not really. She lay on the hotel bed with her coat still draped over a chair, like she might bolt at any moment, staring at the ceiling while the heater clicked on and off, a mechanical attempt at warmth that didn't reach her bones. Her phone stayed face up on the nightstand. No reply. She told herself she deserved the silence, that it was a mercy compared to what she could have received. Anger, venom, public humiliation. Yet the nothingness felt worse. A door closed without being slammed. A life continued without requiring her explanation. The next morning, she walked to a cafe because she couldn't sit still, and the idea of returning to Austin empty-handed made her stomach twist. The streets near Liberty Park were lined with bare trees, and old snow pushed into gritty piles. People walked dogs, held coffee cups, and laughed in pairs, ordinary happiness stabbed in small ways. Inside the cafe, the air smelled of espresso and cinnamon. Couples hunched over laptops. A mother wiped a child's nose with practiced tenderness. Serena took a corner table and ordered tea she didn't drink. Her hands kept reaching for her phone and stopping halfway, as if her own body didn't trust her intentions. 2 days passed like that, telling. waiting, rehearsing speeches no one asked to hear. Then, on the second evening, her burner phone buzzed with a single message. No name, just an address, a time. Serena stared at it until the screen dimmed, then lit it again. Her pulse didn't race. It sank, heavy, as if gravity had doubled. He hadn't forgiven her, but he was willing to speak. That felt like standing on the edge of thin ice and choosing to step forward anyway. The cafe on the message wasn't the one she'd been haunting. This one was older, quieter, with an oak counter worn smooth by decades of elbows and coins and waiting. A small bow above the door gave a tired chime when she entered. Micah was already there. No coat, navy sweater. The kind of clothing that meant he'd walked from somewhere nearby, that meant he didn't have a driver idling outside. His fingers tapped lightly on the table, rhythmic, restless, like there was music trapped in his skin with nowhere to go. Serena approached, heart loud, and slid into the chair across from him. Micah didn't stand, didn't offer a greeting, didn't ask how she'd been. It was as if 6 years had burned away any social ritual between them. Instead, he placed a napkin in the centre of the table and pushed it toward her. Her name was written at the top, neat and controlled. Beneath it, one question. Why did you leave? Serena's throat tightened. She folded her arms, not defensive, bracing. When she spoke, her own honesty startled her. Because I didn't trust myself to stay. Micah's eyes lifted then, finally, and met hers. They weren't searching for lies. They were exhausted from carrying truths alone. Serena inhaled, slowly, like she was approaching a wound she'd avoided touching for years. I had postpartum psychosis, she said. The real kind. The kind that doesn't feel like sadness. It feels like your mind becomes a stranger and you don't know what it might do. Micah didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened, as if the words were rearranging old memories into new shapes. I'd stare out windows, Serena continued, voice low, and wondered if falling would quiet the noise. I was scared I'd hurt them, or you, or myself. I didn't want our daughters to remember a mother who screamed at the shadows, who forgot her own name, who looked at them and couldn't recognize what she was holding. The cafe noise receded, as if the room understood it should make space. Micah blinked slowly and looked away toward the window, toward snow drifting like static outside. You could have told me, he said. I wanted to, Serena whispered, but by the time I had the words, the silence between us was louder than the screaming inside me, and I was ashamed. I thought if you saw it, you'd hate me. Micah's mouth twitched, not a smile, a bitter acknowledgement. I hated you anyway, he said softly, not because you were sick, because you vanished. Serena nodded once. She didn't argue with the sentence. She had earned it. A server arrived. Micah ordered black coffee. Serena ordered nothing. Micah reached into his bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, worn at the corners. He placed it between them like a verdict. Music. Hand-written staff lines, notes trailing off mid-measure. In the margin, faint pencil marks, attempts at a chord progression that never landed. This is the last thing I wrote before you left, Micah said. I tried to finish it afterward. I couldn't. Every time I got to that part, it was like the sound stopped. Serena's fingertips touched the edge of the page. It felt fragile, like paper shouldn't be allowed to carry that much history. Do you still play? She asked. Sometimes, Micah said. When they ask. When they can't sleep. The word they struck Serena again. The life he'd built without her. The bedtime routine she'd missed. The fears she hadn't soothed. The songs she hadn't sung. Serena swallowed. I'm not asking you to forgive 6 years, she said. I'm not asking you to pretend it didn't happen. I want to live the years ahead differently for Nora and Elise. If there's any way you'll let me try. Micah didn't answer immediately. He stared at the unfinished music as if it held the instructions for what to do next. Then he stood. Serena tensed, expecting him to walk out, to end it there. Instead, he said, "If you're serious, Thursday morning, ice rink, they'll be there." And then he left, bell chiming behind him, as if the room itself was exhaling. Serena stayed long after he was gone, the napkin question and the sheet music sitting in front of her like twin weights. When the server offered to clear the table, she shook her head, eyes fixed on the notes. She didn't deserve a second chance. But Micah had just handed her the address of one anyway. Thursday arrived with a sky the colour of steel. The rink smelled like old popcorn and cold metal, like childhood and maintenance and time. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. A faded banner on the wall reads, "Winter is where magic learns to balance." Serena didn't feel magical. She stood near the bleachers, coat buttoned tight, watching Nora and Elise lace their skates with a practiced rhythm. They were fast, sure, bodies loose in a way that came from growing up with winter and with a father who said yes to small joys even when he was tired. Micah leaned against the far rail, arms folded, watching, not hovering, but present. Serena picked up a pair of rental skates. The plastic was scuffed, the laces stiff. Everything about them screamed temporarily, like she had been. She stepped onto the ice. The first 10 minutes were humiliated with an audience. She wobbled, clung to the railing, and slid sideways like a newborn deer. She nearly collided with a teenager carrying nachos and got a sharp look in return. Elise giggled openly. Nora didn't laugh, but she looked away with the kind of embarrassment children reserve for adults who don't know the rules of their world. Serena's cheeks burned. Her pride tried to drag her off the ice. She stayed. She fell. She got up. She fell again. She got up again. Each time she forced herself to smile, not performative, but determined. And something small shifted. Elise's glances lasted longer, not just amused now, curious. Nora's arms, folded tight at first, loosened by degrees. They skated in a wide triangle with Serena as the clumsy corner. No words, just shared space. Later on the bench, Elise sat beside Serena with one skate off, rubbing her ankle. Her hair was tangled from her hat, strands caught in a knot near the nape. Serena's hand lifted instinctively. She stopped herself, then asked softly, "May I?" Elise didn't answer, but she didn't move away either. Serena tried to gather the hair. She'd watched tutorials years ago in lonely hotel rooms, trying to learn motherhood from strangers on screens. Left over right, pull through. Her fingers fumbled. The braid became a twisted mess. Elise winced when Serena tugged too tight. "Ow." "Sorry," Serena breathed. "Hold on." A shadow fell across them. Nora knelt, pulled a purple elastic band from her wrist and held it out. Her face was blank, guarded. "Use this," Nora said. "It holds better." Serena took it carefully, like accepting it too quickly might scare it away. "Thank you." Nora stood. "It's for the braid," she said flatly. "Not you." Serena's chest tightened, but she nodded. "Fair." She tried again, gentler. The braid was still uneven, but it held. Elise glanced at her reflection in a phone screen and shrugged. "It's okay," she said. Then, quieter, almost like it slipped out by accident. "Don't give up." Serena went still, because she knew that phrase. Micah had said it the night she left, voice hoarse with desperation and disbelief. "Don't give up. Don't leave us." Serena blinked hard. She didn't deserve that echo, but Elise had given it anyway. As they left the rink, Micah stayed silent, steering the girls toward the exit without looking at Serena. The twins crunched crackers from a vending machine prize, crumbs dusting their gloves. In the parking lot, Elise tapped Serena's arm lightly, hesitant. She handed Serena a folded piece of paper. Serena unfolded it with careful hands. A drawing, childish, warm. 3 stick figures on ice. One with a ponytail, skates drawn crooked, arms flailing. The caption read, "Mum's first try, still worth it." Serena's throat closed. She tucked the paper not into her purse, but into her coat pocket, over her heart as if proximity could keep it real. The sky above the lot was slate grey. The last flurries of March drifted down like torn paper, and for the first time in years, Serena didn't feel like she was chasing her past. She felt like she was standing in it, finally, choosing not to run. The ride back from the rink was mostly quiet, the kind of quiet that wasn't empty so much as careful. Micah drove with both hands on the wheel, posture tight, as if any sudden movement might shake loose something none of them were ready to name. Nora stared out her window, forehead near the glass. Elise hummed a melody under her breath, soft, looping, the way children do when they're, processing feelings they can't spell yet. Serena sat in the back seat because it felt like the only place she'd earned. She kept unfolding Elise's drawing, smoothing it, folding it again, like rubbing the paper might make the moment stay. She didn't speak. She didn't try to fill the silence with explanations or promises. She simply stayed. When they reached Micah's rental near Liberty Park, the snow had thinned into wet specks that clung to the steps and melted into the wood. Inside, the house smelled like dish soap and laundry and something faintly sweet. Vanilla, maybe. A home that had been built on repetition and survival. Micah moved slowly as he hung up coats. Serena noticed it more now, the tiny hesitations. A hand pausing on the wall, a breath taken before lifting something light. Not dramatic, not obvious, but there, like hairline fractures in glass. Nora and Elise disappeared into their room to argue about whose turn it was to pick a bedtime story. Micah stood in the kitchen a moment, staring at the counter, like he'd forgotten what he'd come to do. Serena hovered at the doorway. "Do you want me to—" she began. "No," Micah said quickly. Then, softer. "Not because I don't want help, because I don't know what kind of help you're offering." Serena nodded. "Fair." He looked at her then, eyes sharp with a tired kind of honesty. "Staying for an hour is easy," he said. "Showing up twice is harder. Don't make them learn that lesson again." "I won't," Serena said, and hated that it sounded like a slogan. She wanted proof too. She just didn't know how to provide it yet. Micah motioned toward the hall. "The guest room's there. If you're still here." Still here. As if presence was a test she had to pass minute by minute. Serena slept lightly, as if her body didn't trust the rest. In the middle of the night she woke to a sound. A faint thud followed by silence. She sat up, heart pounding, listening. Another thud came closer this time, like something dropping against tile. Then a scream. "Nora!" Serena's feet hit the floor before her mind caught up. She ran into the hall and reached the bathroom doorway. At the same moment Nora did, both of them skidding on socks, breath sharp with panic. Micah was crumpled near the bathtub. One arm bent awkwardly beneath him, the other twitching like it belonged to a different body. His face was pale, too pale, and sweat slicked his hairline. His breathing came in shallow, fractured pools, as if air had become something he had to fight for. Nora froze, eyes enormous. Elise appeared behind her, mouth open, no sound coming out. Serena moved. She dropped to her knees beside Micah and pressed her fingers to his neck, searching for a pulse like she still remembered from an old CPR course she'd taken for optics and forgotten for years. The pulse was there, fast, uneven. "Micah?" she whispered, brushing damp hair back. "Hey, stay with me." His eyelids fluttered. His lips parted as if he wanted to say something, but only a broken breath came out. Serena's voice snapped into command, the voice that got used in emergencies and boardrooms alike. "Nora, phone, now. Call 911. Nora blinked. then moved like a robot, hands shaking as she dialed. Elise clutched her sister's sleeve, trembling. Serena kept one hand on Micah's shoulder, steadying him, grounding him. "You're okay," she lied softly. "You're okay. Just breathe." The ambulance arrived with red lights flashing across the frosted windows, turning the hallway into a stuttering warning. Paramedics took over fast, efficiently, asking questions Serena answered while Micah's gaze drifted in and out. Nora and Elise were wrapped in coats over pajamas, hair messy, faces wet without them realizing they'd cried. Serena rode up front in the ambulance because the paramedic told her to, and because she couldn't bear to sit back and watch helplessly. Her hands were clenched so tightly they ached. Every mile felt like an hour. Salt Lake Regional's emergency department was cold and blue-lit, sterile in every way except the human pain pulsing beneath it. Micah was taken straight back. A nurse guided the girls to a waiting area and handed them blankets the colour of the pale sky. Serena sat down across from them, heels dangling off her feet like she'd stepped out of her armour. No phone calls, no emails, no world-saving speeches, just fluorescent light and the sound of a child's sniffle. Elise's drawing pressed against Serena's chest in her coat pocket like a heartbeat. Hours crawled. A doctor emerged after what felt like a lifetime. "Minor cardiac arrhythmia," he said, "likely brought on by stress, fatigue, and dehydration. We're monitoring him overnight. He's stable." Serena exhaled so hard her ribs hurt. Nora didn't look relieved. She looked angry at the world, at her father's body, at whatever invisible force kept taking things from her. Elise leaned her head against her sister's shoulder and whispered, "Is Dad gonna die?" Serena's throat tightened. She didn't sugarcoat it. "Not tonight," she said quietly, "and we're going to make sure he gets help so it doesn't happen again." Nora's eyes snapped to Serena. "We?" Serena held the girl's gaze, refusing to flinch from the accusation. "If you'll let me," she said. "Yes, we." They waited until after 2 a.m., the girls dozing in twisted positions across connected chairs. Serena didn't sleep. She watched the hallway, the doors, every nurse who passed as if she could control fate by staring it down. A nurse approached gently. "He's asking for you," she said, "and he said to bring the girls if they're awake." "They're not," Serena said, then stood anyway. She lifted Elise carefully, the child's head falling heavy against her shoulder. With her other hand, she guided Nora, who insisted she wasn't tired, insisted she was fine, insisted on being older than she was. In ICU room 7B, Micah looked smaller. Machines hummed, tubes and wires traced his body like a map of fragility. His face was pale, but his eyes were open, and when he saw the girls, he tried to smile. "Hey," he rasped. Elise stirred but didn't wake. Nora stepped to the bedside and gripped his hand like she could tether him. Micah's gaze flicked to Serena, and something passed between them. Old history, new fear. "Thanks for coming," he said weakly. "I didn't hesitate," Serena replied, voice soft but firm. "I left a call mid-sentence. Didn't even say goodbye." Micah let out something between a laugh and a wince. "That's progress." Serena sat down beside him. Her hands were empty now. No devices, no folders, just this moment and the people in it. Micah swallowed, throat working. "I don't know how much time I've got," he said quietly. Serena stared at him. "No one does," she said. He shook his head slightly. "I do," he murmured. "More than most. This isn't going away." Serena's chest tightened as if a fist had closed around her lungs. ALS, the word from the folder, the reality in front of her. Micah continued, voice thin but clear. "If you've really changed, if you're really going to be here for them, don't disappear again." His eyes weren't accusing. They were begging in the calm way people beg when they've used up their anger. Serena reached out and laid her fingers over his hand, steady, anchoring. I won't, she said. I'm done running. Micah's shoulders softened, just slightly, like something unclenched. Good, he whispered, because they've started to notice the shape of your shadow, and they'll miss it if it vanishes again. Around 4 a.m., Nora stirred from the chair in the corner, eyes heavy. She looked at Serena sitting by the bed, Elise asleep in Serena's arms. For a long moment, Nora stood there like she was deciding something. Then she walked over to the small cot, picked up the extra hospital blanket folded at the edge, and quietly draped it over Serena's shoulders. Serena didn't move. She didn't even realize it had happened until warmth settled over her like permission. Nora returned to her spot without a word and curled up again, facing the wall. But Serena's fingers twitched under the blanket as if some part of her had finally exhaled. 3 days later, Micah came home. His steps were slower, his voice was thinner, but the house felt steadier with Serena in it, like a beam had been placed under a sagging ceiling. At 6:15 a.m., the coffee pot sputtered like it hadn't worked in years. Toast burned twice. A pan of pancakes smoked so badly, Serena had to fan the air with a cutting board, while muttering something about griddle temperature lies. Nora walked in wearing mismatched socks and stared at Serena like she was a museum exhibit. Serena grinned, cheeks still smudged with flour. Chef Disaster reporting for duty. Nora didn't smile, but she silently opened a window to let the smoke out. That was how it started. Not with grand apologies, with smoke, with breakfast, with the choice over and over to remain in the room. The days that followed didn't feel like a clean redemption arc. They felt like work, slow, awkward, unglamorous work. Serena learned quickly that being present wasn't a single heroic decision. It was dozens of small ones, made when nobody clapped. By day 4, she was on school pickup duty. She stood outside the building with other parents who looked relaxed in sweatshirts, while she looked like someone who had wandered in from a different planet. A structured coat, too still posture, eyes scanning as if the sidewalk might turn into a runway. Elise spotted her first and jogged over, grinning like she'd won something. Nora followed at a measured pace, backpack straps tight in her hands, watching Serena with that wary, evaluating stare. Serena didn't push. She didn't reach for hugs she hadn't earned. She simply said, "Hi," like she meant it, and offered snacks she'd bought in bulk because she didn't yet know their favourite brands. By day 6, she forgot Elise's permission slip. She had to walk back through the hallway, her heels too loud against the linoleum, past children's artwork and posters about kindness that felt like accusations. A teacher gave her a polite smile, and nothing else. Serena took the slip home like it was contraband. By day 7, she argued with Nora about which sweater matched her snow boots. Nora won. Not because Serena conceded, but because she recognised the fight for what it was. A child testing whether Serena would stay, even when disagreed with. That night, while folding laundry, Serena found a shoebox taped shut at the back of Nora's closet. She didn't mean to pry. She told herself she'd put it back. Yet the tape peeled up with a soft, tearing sound that felt like crossing a line. Inside were drawings, dozens of them, crayon, pencil, marker, spanning years. Families drawn in stick figures and messy loops. Some had 3 people, Micah, Nora, Elise. Most had 4. A woman stood beside Micah in almost every picture. Sometimes the woman had no face. Sometimes she had glasses. Once she wore a long white coat that looked painfully similar to Serena's signature trench. In every drawing, the woman's hand was reaching, always reaching, for the girls. Serena's fingers trembled as she flipped through them. The last drawing was different. The lines were cleaner, more certain. 4 figures stood under falling snow. No names, no faces, just shapes. The woman's arms were wrapped around all 3 others, as if holding them together was the only thing keeping them from blowing away. Serena sat on the floor beside the open closet and didn't move for a long time. Later, after the girls went to bed, Serena took a sketch pad from her bag, something she'd once used for storyboard presentations, and tried to draw. She tried to draw them. Her hands were stiff. She messed up Micah's nose. She couldn't get Elise's curls right. She erased and redrew until the paper smudged grey. But she kept going, not aiming for perfect, just aiming for honesty. She taped the drawing outside Nora's room, just above the doorknob. The next morning, nobody mentioned it. But that afternoon, when Serena walked past the room, her drawing was gone. Her stomach dropped until she saw it pinned on the inside wall above Nora's desk, placed carefully beside the shoebox sketches, like it belonged among them. That night, Serena found a slice of toast on a napkin outside her bedroom door. Butter spread unevenly. No note, no signature. But Nora's door across the hall was open an inch wider than usual. Serena stood there staring at the toast like it was a peace offering from a country she'd once invaded. She ate it slowly, as if gratitude required patience. A flyer arrived home in Elise's backpack the following week. Micah tossed it on the kitchen table without much thought. Story day. Parent volunteers needed. Sign up deadline Friday. Elise munched at cereal. Nora stirred hers in silent circles. Serena read the flyer twice, then folded it in half and set it down like it might bite. That evening, while wiping down the counter, Serena spoke without looking up. Maybe I could volunteer. Silence filled the kitchen like heavy air. Elise's eyes widened. You'd have to stand in front of the whole class, she said, half delighted, half horrified. I know, Serena replied. Nora didn't say a word, but she didn't leave the room either. She watched Serena with the same calm scrutiny she used on weather forecasts, deciding if this storm was real. The next morning, Serena signed the form with steady handwriting and trembling hands. Thursday arrived with grey sky and a cold wind that crawled through the playground fencing. Serena wore a cardigan she hadn't touched in years. It smelled faintly of lavender, a scent that felt like an old version of herself. In the school library, 6- and 7-year-olds sat in a semicircle on a carpet, patterned with bright squares. Their shoes squeaked, their whispers rose and fell. A teacher introduced Serena as Nora and Elise's mum. The word mum hit Serena like a physical shove. She swallowed and opened a worn children's fable, one she had rewritten by hand the night before. Not for style points, for survival. It was about a fox, a mother fox who disappeared into the forest, not because she didn't love her cubs, but because darkness had grown inside her until she couldn't see her own paws. The fox wandered alone for a long time, convinced her family was safer without her. But one winter, when the woods went quiet, she followed the scent of the cubs she never stopped missing and found her way back. Serena read every word without trembling. When she looked up, she saw Nora sitting in the middle row, cross-legged, eyes locked on Serena's like she was trying to decide whether stories were allowed to be true. Serena finished, closed the book and didn't linger. She didn't fish for applause or approval. She thanked the class and walked out, letting the story sit in the room like a question. She reached the sidewalk outside when she heard running footsteps were running behind her. Wait! Nora. She ran hard, face flushed, breath short, backpack bouncing. She stopped in front of Serena and stared up, jaw clenched like she was holding something fragile together. Then, without warning, Nora wrapped her arms around Serena's waist and held on tight, as if letting go might erase the moment. I don't need a perfect mum, Nora whispered into Serena's sweater. I just want a real one. Serena's throat closed. She didn't cry, not yet. She crouched slightly and held Nora with careful hands, like she was afraid to squeeze too hard. I'll be here, Serena said, even on the days I don't know how. Nora stepped back, wiped her face fast with her sleeve, and walked toward the car like nothing had happened. But Serena stood frozen for a second longer, heart rattling against her ribs, because something inside her had finally clicked into place. Belonging wasn't granted all at once. It was built. That evening, dinner was quieter than usual. spaghetti, garlic bread, Elise humming a tune from music class. Nora pushed food around with her fork, then looked up suddenly. "Can you tell that fox story again sometime?" she asked, voice casual, like it didn't matter. Micah, sitting at the end of the table, went still. Serena nodded slowly. "Any time." After the dishes were done, Micah pulled out a chair beside her and sat down. He didn't look at her at first. He stared at the wood grain of the table as if reading it. "She hasn't used the word Mom in 6 years, he said quietly. "Not once." Serena's hands curled around her mug, grounding herself. "I know," she whispered. Micah's voice softened, almost breaking. "So whatever you're doing, keep doing it." The wind scratched at the window, the house creaked in old places, but the silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It held something tentative and new, something not shaped like resentment. Months passed, not perfectly, but forward. Serena took fewer calls. She delegated what she once controlled like oxygen. She stayed for homework. She learned the girls' friends' names. She learned that Elise liked her pancakes with too much syrup, and that Nora liked hers plain because Nora liked control in small places. Micah's illness didn't vanish. Some mornings his hands shook. Some evenings he moved like his body was wearing heavier clothing than before. But the house became a team instead of a single tired man holding everything up. 6 months later, Austin, early fall, Zilker Park glowed with warm evening light. Chairs formed arcs around a small wooden stage. Children ran through leaves. Musicians tuned instruments under the hush of twilight. Micah sat in the front row in a denim jacket, posture carefully. Serena sat beside him in a cream scarf and a simple black sweater. No logos, no armour. Their fingers were loosely laced, not as a performance, but as a habit. Nora and Elise appeared under the stage lights. They stood side by side, shoulders squared, faces solemn in the way children get when they know something matters. A piano began, Micah's old composition, reworked. Strings joined gentle as breath, then the girls sang. The lyrics were new, Serena's words sewn into Micah's melody like a repaired seam. You waited in silence. I built my sky with fear. You lit the windows. I disappeared. The park fell quiet. People stopped chewing, stopped whispering, stopped scrolling. Even a baby nearby went still. Micah's hand tightened around Serena's with every line, not possessive, anchoring. When the final note faded, there was a beat of silence, pure breath. Then applause crashed over them like a wave. Nora and Elise stepped off stage and walked straight toward their parents. Nora hugged Micah first, fierce and quick. Elise wrapped both arms around Serena's waist and stayed there, face pressed into her. You wrote the end, Micah said softly to Serena, voice rough with emotion. For a song we never finished. Serena swallowed. I found the ending when I stopped writing for myself, she replied, and started writing for us. Micah reached into his pocket and pulled out a scarf, lavender-scented, slightly faded. Serena recognized it instantly, the one she'd left behind in another life. He wrapped it gently around her neck, hands careful. No more disappearing, he said. Serena looked at him, at their daughters, at the life they were building in imperfect pieces. I'm here, she said. I'm staying. Micah nodded once, as if accepting a promise he would still verify with time. Then he squeezed her hand and murmured, almost too quietly to hear, Come home, not as a visitor. Serena didn't reach for a suitcase. She reached for her daughter's hands, and together they walked forward. No grand speech, no dramatic vow, just the simplest, hardest thing in the world, staying.